My name is Alistair Young. I'm the director of the Jean Monnet Center here at Georgia Tech. We are starting sharply on time because the ambassador has to be at the airport for his flight. He'll be leaving here at 5:30 sharp. So I'd like to turn over the introduction of our speaker to Yves Berthelot, the Vice Provost for International Initiatives.
Thank you, Alistair. It is truly wonderful to be here. I'm so excited to be here and see this large audience. So, very briefly, on behalf of President Peterson, President Georgia Tech, of course, I would like to welcome you all here to this very exciting lecture. We have some very distinguished visitors. Let me just point out just a few. We have the député from the Lorraine region, member of the French Congress, Jean-Yves Le Déaut, who is right here. He's a key advisor to the president on scientific and technological matters. We have, of course, the Consul General Denis Barbet here in Atlanta. But most of all, we are extremely honored and deeply appreciative to have here with us today His Excellency, the Ambassador of France to the United States in Washington, D.C., Monsieur Gérard Araud, who will give a lecture today on French foreign policy and today's major international crises. Monsieur Araud is a career diplomat. He was appointed Ambassador of France to the U.S. Last September. He previously held numerous positions within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, notably including that of Director for Strategic Affairs, Security and Disarmament, Ambassador of France to Israel, and Director General for Political Affairs and Security. Most recently, he was Permanent Representative of France to the UN, the United Nations in New York City. He's an expert on Middle East and strategic and security issues. Really, we are incredibly honored to have His Excellency with us today. Without further ado, help me welcome His Ambassador, Monsieur Araud.
It's always a bit weird to be called Excellency, you know, really, it's, but actually I love it. You know, it's, no, thank you very much. I try, you know, usually when an ambassador says, I'll be brief, you know, after that you have 45 minutes of platitudes. So I will try not to be brief and not to utter too many platitudes. I will touch only one or two topics and after answer questions on all the issues that you would want to raise. The first issue for me, which is our priority, is COP21, which is the UN conference on climate change, which will be held in Paris at the end of November, first days of December, because it will be really a critical conference organized under the auspices of the UN of all the countries in the world, trying to eventually take the major decisions to limit, to fight against climate change, to limit the global warming. So for us, it's not the last chance meeting, but it's certainly a critical moment. The difference with the previous conferences that we have had is that today there is such a mobilization of the world about climate change that actually everybody wants to be on board. No country wants to appear as responsible of a failure. So as for today, we have received 150 actually national plans. 150 countries representing 89% of the world emissions have sent plans to show the way they are going to limit their gas emissions in the coming 20 years. What they try to do. And all these plans are actually realistic. You know, it's obvious that one size doesn't fit all. You know, we can't ask the same commitments, the same efforts from an economy like the economy of Germany or France and the economy of an African country. You know, really, it has, you know, each country has to choose what he wants to do and the way it wants to do. So I think that we have the momentum to have a successful meeting in Paris, but at the same time, the commitment of states is certainly not enough. Fighting climate change means actually, in a sense, changing our way of life. And it won't be a top-down approach. we need the commitment of everybody, of you as human, as human being, but also of the cities, of the territories, or of the business community. And that's what we will try to get in Paris. So in Paris, you'll have on one side the 193 countries, meeting and taking their commitments and agreeing to a world convention about what we are going to do and what the way we are going to act in the coming years, which means the national commitments, and after that a sort of review process, in a peer process in the coming years, where we are going to review the commitments we have taken and the way we have fulfilled or not fulfilled these commitments, and we hope to improve these commitments. But we'll need also the mobilization of the cities. The cities represents today 60% of the world emissions. So there will be a summit of cities. Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, is very active on this issue, and he will hold a summit of cities with the mayor of Paris. So there will be also a commitment of cities, which means that, for instance, cities will take commitments in terms of waste management, for instance, or energy savings, and the rich cities will be able to help the cities which don't have the means, to act in these fields. But we need also the mobilization of the business community. And I'm traveling a lot in the US, and I'm amazed, as soon as you cross the Beltway, the way the US business community actually is mobilized to fighting climate change. Today I met yesterday I met the CEO of Coca-Cola. Today I met the president of Delta. And both of them, they told me they are very serious about low carbon economy. Really, Delta has taken the commitment of really decrease by 1.5% every year the carbon imprint of the company, and Coca-Cola, has made also has taken very, very effective and stringent decisions. It's the same thing with Walmart. Very often I said, Walmart, it's not really for tattooed hipsters from Brooklyn. Really, it's a mom and pop corporation, and actually Walmart itself is committed. Why? For two reasons. In a sense, contrary to what people say, fighting climate change is not bad for business. It's good for business. For Walmart, it meant basically energy saving. An energy saving, really, you are saving millions of dollars, and at the same time, you are reducing the carbon imprint of the corporation. So and the second element, why it's good for business community, is because people like you, the millennials and the followers, actually you care. All the polls show that you care about the way the corporations, you are consumers, or you'll be consumers, and you care about the social responsibility of the corporations. So we will have a lot of CEOs will come to Paris and will affirm their commitment to fighting climate change. So our goal really will be that the conference in Paris should be a sort of a tipping point. It's not the end of the road. Changing a way of life takes decades. It will take decades. Really, we're not going to close the coal mines tomorrow. I understand the concerns of people in Wyoming or Kentucky, but it's not the issue. Really, it's all a process, and this process to be successful has to be a process by everybody, all the community and the communities. So our goal will be in Paris that there is a sort of common message coming out of Paris saying we, the world, we are serious about low carbon economy. And that after that, really, basically, we will have to implement this commitment. And I do think that we can, because traveling around the country also, it's really striking the way the technology is there or very close to be there. You know, when you go to the laboratories and actually in such a scientific university than like Georgia Tech, you know actually that the science is there or coming to there. You know, the price of solar energy has been divided by 4 in 20 years. And when you look, you know, and you know that the laboratories, the scientists are studying the way to improve the, you know, the output of solar energy, and also in terms of suddenly the English name is escaping me, stockage, the storage, sorry, of course, the storage of energy, you know, because one of the big questions about renewable energy, of course, is the storage, you know, really. And there are a lot of solutions which are studied, and all the scientists that you meet, you know, tell us will tell you, you know, we'll find it, you know, really. And you, the Americans, you are a creative country. You are really you trust and you believe in science, and you are in the scientific university. So I think you should be as optimistic as I am. And to meet a French optimistic is quite a feat. So you should believe me, you know, really, you know, really. So that's really, for us, it has been, for the French diplomacy, it has been a major mobilization. Really, I've traveled all around the country. I've really spoken to a lot of businessmen, scientists, mayors. It's really striking. You know, the mayor of Atlanta I met yesterday will be in Paris in the conference, and we have talked about the way the city of Atlanta, you know, was contributing to fighting climate change. But I met, you know, even the mayor of Houston. You know, really, in a sense, really to preach climate change. You know, a low carbon economy in Houston is like if you try to convert the people from Bordeaux to Mormonism, you know, really, to a religion without alcohol in Bordeaux, you know, really, it will be the same, you know, in Houston, low carbon economy. But nevertheless, the city of Houston actually is really serious about it. So that's the first topic I wanted to raise. And as you are young, you know, I really do hope that, you know, you fulfill your duty of citizens, and maybe to convince some members of the Congress, I won't give the name of them, that really actually there is a climate change. Actually, the man has an influence on the climate change, and actually fighting the climate change is not bad for the economy. It's the opposite. It's offering a lot of opportunities to the economy, and actually the US, the Americans are already mobilized, and that the citizens are ahead of the politicians on this issue. Don't be worried. It happens in a lot of countries on other issues. The second element that I wanted to raise, which is the problem of terrorism, because you remember that France has been victim of a major terrorist attack in January, when terrorists, have killed first journalists, and secondly they have attacked and killed Jews in a kosher grocery store. It's obvious that Europe actually is facing a major threat, a major terrorist threat, and which oblige all the European societies, to mobilize and also to adjust their legislation, really with the usual debates about what is the balance between security and liberty. It's a debate that you have known when after the 9/11, and we are going also through this debate. Thousands of young Europeans are in Syria or are back from Syria. Thousands of young Europeans. For the French, the figure is 1,600 French. We estimate that 120 French have already been killed in Syria. Our estimate is that at any moment we have 600 French in Syria fighting. These guys will come back. They will come back radicalized. They will come back military trained, and they will come back also rabidly anti-Semitic. So for us, it's a major threat, a major security threat. And we have been obliged to deploy thousands of soldiers to protect the synagogues and the Jewish institutions. So it's really, so that's certainly right now, certainly the major security threat that we have to consider. Nevertheless, nevertheless, we have decided to face the challenge. In Northern Africa, we have deployed 3,000 soldiers, who are fighting the terrorists in the region of the Sahel region, really 3,000 soldiers. The Sahel region, it's in terms of environment is one of the worst area in the world, really. Our soldiers need 12 liters of water every day, in winter, it's 100 degrees during the day and 20 degrees during the night. And in summer, it goes to 150 degrees. Really, it's terrible. Really, it's a terrible area. It's millions of miles square. It's a huge region. Look at the map. And so our soldiers are deployed, and they will remain there, intercepting terrorist groups and fighting them. We are with the American support. The Americans are providing us tactical airlift and intelligence. So we are together, and the Americans have deployed also some special forces there. So that's a commitment that we have taken, because at some moment in January 2013, we saw the terrorist group who were going to take over a country of the region, Mali. So we went there to protect the country, and now we are staying and we'll do our job, however difficult, dangerous, and costly it is. In Iraq, the French, we have been the first one to join the American strikes, and right now, because the Americans have requested us to deploy an aircraft carrier, because there is no American aircraft carrier right now, so they're requested to be there. So we have sent a aircraft carrier in the Gulf, really, and we are taking part in the strikes in Iraq and also in Syria. So again, we are side by side with our American friends, fighting terrorism, fighting it in Africa, fighting it also in Iraq and Syria. But of course, it's certainly a long-term endeavor. The dangers are really certainly there, and especially considering the geography, the human and physical geography of Europe, all the European countries feel threatened. I was referring to the attacks in Paris, which led, I don't know if you remember, to the mobilization or an incredible demonstration in the streets of Paris. Millions of French demonstrated, saying that they won't cave in front of the threat. But there were, an attack against the Jewish Museum in Brussels, Belgium, an attack, in Copenhagen, really, and there was several attacks which have been foiled in different European countries. So the geography is there, the threat is there, and we have to fight it together. And I think that the Americans and the Europeans, we are together in this endeavor. The last element I want to raise, which is linked in a sense to the previous one, is of course the refugee crisis. Really, in a sense, when you are looking at the Syria civil war, you can, you can say, if you are American, you can say that the vital interests of the US are not involved in Syria. Really, you can say, if you are in terms of realpolitik, you can say, what are the interests of the US in Syria? Really, in a sense, in the Middle East, the assessment of your national interest may have changed. You don't need the oil of Middle East anymore. That's an important factor. Really, you don't need the oil of the Middle East. And the second reason, I guess, for American interest, which is Israel is not threatened. Is not threatened. So in American way, you can say, the war in Syria, it's awful, it's dreadful, but at the same time, our national interests are not really involved. While for the Europeans, it's a vital crisis. It's a vital crisis because for the issue I was raising, which is the foreign fighters, you know, the thousands of young Europeans going there, and which is, of course, for us, it's extremely dangerous, and the refugee crisis. You know, really, out of 24 million of Syrians now, 6 million are out of Syria. Actually, half of the Syrians are displaced. Half of the Syrians have been obliged to leave their home. And out of these 12 million, 6 million are displaced within Syria and 6 million out of Syria. They are living in dismal conditions. And of course, you know, Europe is very close. And we, the Europeans, we are facing this sort of impossible predicament. You know, really, if we close our borders, these people die because they try to cross the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and they die. You see the terrible photo of babies, of children dying and on our shores. But at the same time, if we open our borders, it means that, you know, really you have millions of people coming. You know, try to imagine if you had, you know, millions of people crossing the Rio Grande, you know, and entering the US. What will be the reaction? You know, really, in a sense, it's not only a real challenge in terms of what to do with these people, you know, really, but it's also a challenge in political sense because our political life is not that different from yours. And you have the way you have, you know, really, I'm not going to give names, you have far-right candidates which are really, really very anti-immigrant, with a very anti-immigrant message. We have also in Europe, also we have a far-right parties in all over Europe with a very anti-immigrant message. And it's obvious that the refugee crisis is in a sort of a blessing for these far-right parties. So there is also a political element. And the problem is that all the solutions that we can find are only short-term solutions. You know, really, we can try to avoid the tragedies, but at the same time, we simply can't take, you know, 5 or 6 million of Syrians in Europe. You know, it's really, it's politically and economically impossible. And so that's all really the reason why, again, I'm saying that for us, the Syrian crisis is a vital interest. And that really, not only for humanitarian reasons, but for political reasons, the Europeans really would want desperately to find a way out, to find a political solution in Syria. I stop here and I'm ready because I want to, we have a real conversation. We have to 5:30, I'm really sorry, but I don't want to miss my plane. And well, usually the planes are late, you can say, but nevertheless, let's trust Delta Airlines. So I will. So I'm ready to answer any question, you know, really.
European interest in Syria changed with the recent Russian intervention?
You know, again, you have to, if you want to I'm going to be a bit French, which means a bit conceptual, arrogant, and dogmatic. And, you know, the difference between the man in the street and the diplomat. You know, the problem of the man, you know, the man in the street, you know, for you are a diplomat, there is something more frustrating than the guy who said, oh, you should do that, you know, you should take care of the immigrants, you should do that, and that. The problem is that the countries don't behave this way. The countries are defending their national interest, including the United States, by the way. And so we are, so you have, the first thing you have to do when you are looking at an international crisis is to look at the interest of the people. So why the Russians came there? Why did they come there? It's not because they are evil. You know, really, no. I know that some people are thinking in these terms, but it doesn't fly. It's not the way. It's what are the Russian interests? What is the Russian analysis? Basically, what you could think of the Russian interest and analysis, because we are not Russian and we are not in the brain of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. What we can say is that in the coming months before the summer, the Assad forces were suffering, were retreating, and there was a moment, you know, it was a moment when suddenly people said, well, actually, they may collapse. So the Russians stepped in, and it's not only the Russians, it's the Russians and the Iranians, because the Russians are in the air, but the Iranian soldiers are on the ground, and they are acting together. It's combined joint operations. And so they stepped in to prevent the fall of Assad. It's very clear. So the message that it's sending to us is, I, Russia, I will not accept the fall of Assad. So why? The Russian policy has always been very consistent since the beginning of the war. The Russians have always told us, we don't love Assad, but we prefer Assad to the jihadists. They said, I've always put the debate in these stark terms. They said, we are a neighbor, we have 26 million of Muslims, and we can't really consider the idea of the jihadists winning in Syria. So in a sense, the Russian, it doesn't mean that I approve what the Russians have done, but I think the first thing is to try to understand what they have done. After all, you can say it won't work, but the fact is that they are sending this message. And as they are not stupid, far from that, they know that there is the risk of getting bogged down in Syria the way they were in Afghanistan. So immediately, in political terms, they are sending us a message. The message being, your enemy, my enemy, is ISIS, the Islamic threat. Okay, you don't like Assad, well, that's not a problem. Let's go together against ISIS, and we'll talk of Assad later. That's really the message they are sending. And so now, in a sense, our answer, the answer of the Western countries, is actually, no, it doesn't, you are wrong, because in a sense it's Assad which has created ISIS. So supporting Assad is only reinforcing ISIS, because the enemy of Assad will really prefer ISIS to Assad. So really the problem is Assad. That's our answer. While the Russians are saying, no, it's really, you need ground forces to defeat ISIS, and the Assad forces are the only one available, and we'll talk of Assad later on. So that's so in a sense, everything now is in flux, because the Russian initiative has obliged us to reconsider and oblige everybody, including the US, but also the countries in the region, to reconsider the situation. Really, Assad, ISIS, what to do, what to do. So that's where we are. There was yesterday a meeting in Paris of the ministers of the coalition, to assess the situation. And I think today there will be a meeting in Vienna with Russia, the US. The US was in Paris, of course, with Russia, Iran, to discuss the issue. And the problem is really what is the role of Assad? Can we think of a political transition with Assad? Which guarantee can we get that at the end of the transition, Assad will leave or will not leave? So it's, again, really, I don't have the answer. But again, I really want to, if you are studying foreign relations, I really, my message will be always don't start by taking side. Really, look first, try to analyze the balance of power, which really, the balance of power. Don't say A is right or B is wrong, because A is convinced of being right and B is convinced of being right. Really, everybody is convinced to be right. And anyway, being right is not so important. It is to win, which is important. Really, we were right in 1940 and we were defeated by Hitler. Really, it happens. So really, what is the balance of power? What are the intentions of both sides? In a sense, and looking at your country, what do you wish, but what do you can? And trying to have what you wish and you can to have a sort of overlapping. Maybe it may be modest or not modest. Really, that's really the message we try. Really, I'm trying to convey. Yes.
First of all, I would like to thank you for taking time out to share this. But my question right national parties that have emerged in Europe. Is the threat that these far right national parties pose the European integration process?
No, I think, as I've said, I was posted here in the late 80s, and in the late 80s I was struck by how different our political life was, on both sides of the Atlantic. And coming back in 2009, because I went to New York, and up to a point New York is the US, I discovered that actually the political life of the both sides of the Atlantic were actually quite similar. You have basically the same crisis of the middle class, which feels threatened in its status, in its identity, and in a sense, the same conviction that the traditional parties, left and right, have been ineffective, and the temptation to try something else. Frankly, when I look at some candidates, I don't give the name of them, when I look at some candidates, what they say, with the particular genius of this person, but what they say is quite similar to what the far-right parties in Europe, or in all the countries in Europe, are saying. So it's the same, in a sense, the same malaise. Really, I don't like I'm a history buff, so I don't like historical parallels because they don't make sense. But nevertheless, I'm going to engage. It's very, in the 30s, we had this crisis already. Really, an economic crisis, 1929, already coming from the US, and a major crisis which is leading to a major political crisis of suddenly the liberal economies, the liberal democracies unable to handle this crisis, unable to take the societies out of the crisis, which is leading to the middle class looking for something else. And here we are. In Europe, it's anti-immigrant, exactly like here. And since most of our immigrants are Muslims, it has taken an Islamophobic side, very, very, very clearly, and it's also anti-EU, anti-European Union. Basically, like in this country, the message is let's close our borders. Let's close our borders against the immigrants, let's close our borders against the Chinese goods, really, and let's come back to the paradise of the 50s or the 60s. We were so happy, everybody was white, and there was no unemployment. That's basically the message, really the message that these parties are having. It's a simple message. And the problem is the message may be very simple, but the answer is always reasonable, more complicated, more nuanced. Really, and that's the problem we are facing. Nevertheless, I think that on the short term, the real threat is, which would be a disaster for the European Union, is Brexit. It's really the referendum which will be about the UK presence in the European Union. A no will be devastating. Not only for UK, but for the rest of Europe, because it will mean that the European endeavor, it's a two-way street. There is a rewind mode, and also that a country as important, as reasonable, as serious as the UK has taken the decision to leave. So for the extreme right, which really wants to basically the end of the European Union, they will say, you see, you can do it, we can do it. And I really do hope, I really pray that the British electors make the right choice. Again, it's not granted. It's not granted because considering the problems of the European Union, voting to the European Union may not be that appealing. Really, when you see a European Union which is going to a crisis on the euro, a European Union where the growth is not very good, where you have this refugee crisis. So it's really, it's quite a challenge, and I really, but again, I trust our British colleague. There was a British poet, Spencer, in the 16th century, who said, "France, our sweet enemy." Well, I don't know who is in charge of maybe to be the, well, yeah.
What is the position of
that's again, you know, when in 2011, when Putin was saying it's Assad or the jihadist, at the time, and we do think it was wrong, that actually in 2011 there was a real choice. Maybe it has been now a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the problem is very clearly, you know, you have hundreds of now, Syria is divided into hundreds of gangs, small groups, a lot of them being simply hooligans who are racketing a village or a street, you know, really. So the normal process would be to organize free election under international monitoring, to have a government, a democratic provisional government, which after that will draft a new constitution. The problem is that you can wonder whether it's still possible, you know, considering that everything has collapsed. But that's what we would want to, we are advocating.
Come on to referee for you.
Yeah, really.
Straight.
I don't hear.
So can you speak up, please?
So yeah, I just want to talk about the recent Mistral ships deal which got cancelled with Russia. So because of that, I recently heard that a deal is going to Egypt, but as a result, Russians are also going to install the technologies on those ships. So I just wanted to know, how does that serve the French national interest if they cancel the deal with Russia to close now the Russians have been taking advantage of the deal with Egypt as well?
No, I think, you know, it's this gentleman is alluding to the fact that before the crisis we had a very important arms deal with Russia. We were supposed to deliver two ships. It was quite an important deal for more than $1 billion. And of course, you know, really the question was after the crisis, when the crisis erupted, what the French are going to do. As you can know, you know, there was a French moralist in the 17th century saying that everybody is ready to accept the sacrifice of his neighbor. And actually that was the case in a very strange way. Everybody was saying to the French, you are not going to do it. You know, really, and thank you. Actually, but nobody offered any support or any help. You know, really, it's... So eventually we decided, and I think it was courageous, I have to say it, because the same people were lecturing us didn't tell us thank you. We decided not to deliver the ship. So we had a negotiation with the Russians, we have refunded the Russians, really, which is $1 billion, 949 millions of dollars. And after that, we had an agreement with the Russians because there was some Russian equipment on the ship. We had an agreement with the Russians that we could resell the ship, and we resold the ship. We are reselling the ships, actually, to the Egyptians, and which we consider actually it's tout est bien qui finit bien. Everything is fine, which is finishing in a very fine way for our national interest, but it was not granted, you know, really. So we have been courageous, say us thank you, and at the same time we got the money. So say bravo, tell us bravo.
Yes. Ambassador, you mentioned the intervention in Syria where election happened. What role do you feel the United Nations should be playing in this?
You know, I have on my, even if I am a diplomat, I have a sort of a conscience. You know, and so I was, you know, I had been I have drafted and tabled the resolution about Libya. Resolution 1973, which led to the military intervention, the fall of Gaddafi, and some people say now a mess in Libya. So I'm really, so from time to time, you know, I'm looking in my mirror and I'm saying, was it right, what is wrong, what is the balance, you know, really. And a lot of people say the problem was that after the fall of Gaddafi, the United Nations didn't help the Libyans to rebuild the state, to organize election and so on and so on. But the problem is that these people don't know is that the Libyans didn't want us to go, you know, really. And I say that because I'm convinced that the Syrian people, they won't want to have the UN taking over. They will not accept to have foreign forces or blue helmets coming in Syria. So I think we will have to try to, the UN can bring, the technicians for drafting election, to organize election, drafting constitution, really. There will be a need of rebuilding the country. The country has been devastated. So the UNDP, the UN Development Program should come. So there will be this technical support. But really, I do think the logic will be, since it's the mess, there is such anarchy, the problem will be to deploy a peacekeeping operation. Really blue helmets to try to stabilize the situation. And that would be I think the rational, really answer that you are, in a sense, implying. But unfortunately, but that's my analysis, I'm quite convinced, unfortunately, that the Syrian people themselves will not want to have foreign forces on their ground.
So, Ambassador, given the long-standing economic problems that we've faced for a few decades that have grown really acute since the 2007 crash, do you have any idea of any sane economic, reasonable economic policies we could take to cure? Have you heard of the term secular stagnation?
First, I'm always reminding you no, I understand, yeah. The question, to summarize the question, really, in a sense, what could be a new economic model for a stable growth in the future in the Western societies. And the first thing that I was reminding my American friends is really the crisis came from here. Really, thank you very much. But, really, and we have been paying it very, very early. The problem that we are facing, in a sense, in Europe, and I'm talking only of Europe, is the problem of the future of our welfare state. You have to understand that the welfare state in Europe, it's not simply the way of taking care of the people, it's an element of our identity. The European countries, the European consensus, popular consensus, is built around the idea that it's up to the society, to the state, to take care of the downtrodden, the sick people, the old people. So we have a very strong welfare state. The problem of the welfare state is that now it's undermined by, first, the aging of the society. The European societies are aging, which means that the proportion between working people and retired people is shifting at the expense of the former. The second element is that curing disease is more and more expensive. And the third element is because of the globalization, basically the taxable basis can cross the borders. In other words, really, the people who don't, if you increase the taxes, people simply can go across the borders or cross the ocean and come to the US or go to Singapore or elsewhere. So we, the Europeans, we have to adjust our welfare state because we want to keep it. It's part of our identity and we are proud of it, but we have also to modernize it and to find, really, to find a new model. Some Scandinavian countries have started to do it. And because, usually people say in a global world, considering that the taxable basis can live overnight your country, you have simply to decrease the taxes of the business community. And usually everybody, all the business community agrees with this point, in a very strange way. And, but which means that at the same time, we couldn't afford our welfare state. So we have to find the right balance between keeping our business competitive, but also keeping our welfare system. The problem of the welfare system, our welfare system, it has been created in 1945, where everybody was poor. Basically, you had a few rich people, but in Europe after the war, everybody was poor. So in a sense, the welfare system is taking care of everybody in a very equal manner. So basically, if your monthly wages are $2,000 or if they are $20,000, more or less you receive the same treatment. So it's really certainly something on which we could work. Secondly, and that's the most sensitive spot, is, we had the retirement age was fixed at a moment where basically it was 60 years old, at a moment where the life expectancy was 60 or 62 or 65. Now the life expectancy is 83, 84. So it really, you have a new question about what does it mean. So we are trying, again, to delay the age of retirement. But you have to understand, the people said, what is the matter? The society is richer and richer, and actually we have to work more. It's really, so in political terms, it's really difficult also to try to reform the society, because in a sense, every time that you reform the society, the consequence is people say, well, you're asking all the time sacrifice. While the 1% are richer and richer, we have the same problem that you have, less, because our inequalities are really less staggering than yours. But really, there is a problem. So we have a debate in Europe about really reform. What does it mean? The problem is usually the reforms are, basically, that's the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal, really, and it's very difficult to sell that to the man in the street, to the common man. The common man who is earning $2,000 a month, asking him to make sacrifice. So that's the political challenge that we all face, really, in all the European countries, and in a sense, you face it also with the debate about the inequalities, really. It's extremely weird, and if you look at with a sort of common sense to see that actually our societies are richer and richer globally, and that actually nevertheless the middle classes, for instance, are not getting richer, really. So that's a political debate which is starting, and maybe which will be one of the topics of your presidential elections, which is certainly a topic in our political life, and our government is trying to do it. It's a socialist government. Don't be afraid. Socialist means left wing. It's not Bolshevist. Really, basically, it's left-wing government, reformist government, and which is trying to be faithful to its commitment to the commitment to welfare state and to the normal man, but at the same time trying to make our economy more competitive, and it's quite a challenge.
Can I suggest we gather a few? 10 minutes left.
Okay.
And there are a lot of questions. Well, gather a few, then he can pick and choose, and I'll keep an eye on.
There is a gentleman in the back. I've been really trying desperately.
All right.
Thank you. France seems to have done a much better job in developing non-carbon sources of energy than the United States has. Hydro, nuclear, for instance, the use of tidal currents on parts of your coast, so hydroelectric energy. Other than your superior enlightenment, how do you encounter this greatest success?
No, actually, I'm really sorry. I can't, endorse this anti-American declaration. Really, it's. I don't know you are French or liberal. I don't know what you are. Really, and a sort of American-hating people. No, because no, seriously, for this country again, there is a sort of a phenomenon that, as usual. A sort of bottom-up mobilization of the American society. Look at Iowa. Iowa is not the most leftist state that you have in this union, and actually 30% of the electricity could be provided. They have the capacity. It depends by wind energy. 30% of the electricity in the state of Iowa. You go to, again, and a lot of, as for the solar energy, because in a sense you have great advantages, which is your geography. Why? First, you have a lot of wind. When you live in the Midwest, that you have a lot of wind. Really, from time to time, too much wind, but you have a lot of wind. But you have also, we have problems, to have a wind machine. The problem is in European countries, it's so crowded that basically it's in your yard, in your backyard. And people don't like it so much, really. While you have, here, you have this room, to have wind machines. But you have also for solar energy. I went to Stanford, really no insult, it's, really, I went to Stanford, and there, they have installed, a power plant for cold and hot water, and it's with solar energy, really energy provided by a solar, a facility in the Mojave Desert. So no, things are happening. The city of San Francisco is now treating 90% of its waste, 90%, and the mayor told me that they want to reach the 100%. And of course, the last 10% are by far the most difficult. And when you meet all the mayors of the big cities, I met the mayor of Chicago, mayor of Los Angeles, Houston. All of them, they are thinking in these terms about the waste management, which is really about public transportation, really. And the mayor of Chicago offered me, a pot of honey, coming from the roof of the town hall, because they have installed, they have installed a sort of a garden, really. And so no, this country and this country is creative, and things are moving forward. Really, in a sense, as for the renewable energy, it's moving maybe quick. Actually, it's faster here than it is in France, because as I said, when we want to put a wind machine, there is always an historical church not far from there, and really, and we simply can't do it, and. Really, and the landscape, you are not going to spoil the landscape, and so on.
I'm afraid I'm getting the cut signal here.
6 minutes, I still, no? 5? No, I have to go?
Well, he knows the Atlanta traffic.
The Atlanta traffic. He doesn't want to keep me there for overnight, really, it's, really, so, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Please. It was a very wide-ranging, engaging, and humorous presentation. So thank you.
I will come
very
back.
much. We would love to
come
have
back.
you back.